I knew something was off when I walked into the server room and smelled eucalyptus essential oil instead of burning plastic in desperation. That was my first clue. The second, the whiteboard where I usually mapped out failover protocols now had Sierra's Q1 vision board scrawled in glitter marker, complete with magazine clippings of Bali, baby goats, and a quote from Gwyneth Paltrow about manifesting abundance. I'd been in IT for 20 years. I'd restored production environments with nothing but a paperclip in spite. I'd watched grown men cry in DevOps stand-ups. But this was an omen. My name's Rachel Blake. I'm 42, divorced, child-free by choice, and I smoke exactly one menthol cigarette a year on my work anniversary in front of the diesel generator I personally reprogrammed during that blackout in 21. I don't do politics. I don't do pep talks. I do keep 13 data centers from going full Chernobyl. For 5 years, I've been the duct tape and digital prayer beads holding Talon systems together. And for 5 years, I've been invisible. Until the golden boy showed up. Chase Fremont, 32, MBA, more jawline than IQ. Son of the CEO, wearer of loafers with no socks, and proud speaker of phrases like synergize the backend culture pipeline. He strutted into HQ on a Monday morning like he just invented computers. Brought his influencer girlfriend Sierra, too. She introduced herself with, I'm really into energy healing and microdosing leadership, which I'm pretty sure means she's allergic to Excel. The moment Chase was appointed VP of Operations, I knew my clock was ticking. The whispers in the hall started instantly. He's shaking things up. She's got a real eye for modern UX. Rachel's too. Analog. Analog? I once rebuilt our routing firmware using a Pi Zero and 6 hours of Red Bull psychosis. But yeah, let's trust the woman who thinks Raid is a Kardashian. The worst part? The meetings. I used to be the ghost in the corner, quiet, competent, caffeine-fueled. Now I'm the ghost who doesn't even get invited. My Slack access mysteriously downgraded. My tickets reassigned. Sierra started holding mindful workflow alignment sessions in my old office, burning sage over the backup tapes. And still, I held the line. When Chase asked me for a summary doc, I gave him a 97-page operational risk report with color-coded heat maps, vendor expiration timelines, and a red flag labeled, do not allow unauthorized admin access without root credential staging. He replied with a thumbs-up emoji and a Slack message that said, lol thanks, looks long. By the way, if you've made it this far without bailing, maybe consider tapping that subscribe button or dropping a like. Not just for me, but for every IT ghost eating lunch in the server room with one hand while rebooting payroll systems with the other. It keeps the caffeine flowing and the meltdown stories coming. Anyway, I knew the end was coming, so I got ready. First, I documented everything. I'm talking full architecture maps, license schedules, shutdown contingencies. I encrypted backups, flagged expiring contracts, printed hard copies of every vendor agreement, and uploaded my resignation letter to 3 separate cloud drives. Not because I wanted to use it, but because I knew someone else would force my hand. And then I did something Chase would never understand. I created a failsafe, not a trap, not sabotage, just a protocol, a system that recognized me as the architect. A system that, if misused, would slowly revoke access, degrade functionality, and trigger alert chains to vendors, legal, and eventually the board. Not out of malice, out of survival. Because Talon Systems didn't just use me. It ran on me, and the moment they forgot that, well, let's just say you don't pull the Jenga piece labeled Blake R and expect the tower to stay upright. By Friday, the whiteboard had a new note. Sierra's working on a server room makeover, thinking succulents and LED lighting. I rolled my eyes so hard I almost dislocated something. I closed my final report, saved a local copy, and wrote one last sentence at the bottom. If I'm not here Monday, good luck. I didn't think I'd need it. I was wrong. Monday, 11:06 a.m. I was deep in a ticket for a load balancer, ghosting connections like a Tinder match with daddy issues when I got the ping. Hey Rachel, can you swing by my office for a quick sync? The smiley face was the corporate equivalent of a mosquito whining in your ear before it bites you. I stared at the message for a second, considered faking a fire drill, then sighed, saved my work, and trudged down the hall toward the glass box Chase had claimed as his strategic vision hub. That's what he called it in the memo. The rest of us called it the aquarium. He didn't even look up when I walked in, just kept tapping at his phone, smirking. Sierra was perched on the conference table like a discount Bond villain, sipping something green and overpriced out of a mason jar. She gave me a little wave and said, hey ye girl. Cute flannel. I hadn't spoken more than 3 words to her since she'd revamped our internal wiki by deleting everything and replacing it with Canva slides. I think the flannel comment was her attempt at friendship or mockery. Same difference. Take a seat, Chase said, gesturing vaguely without making eye contact. I didn't. He finally looked up, grinning like a frat boy who just discovered his trust fund had a second trust fund. So, after a lot of internal convos and forward-thinking brainstorming, he began, Jesus, the buzzwords were leaking out of his pores, we've decided to restructure operations a bit. Sierra's got a real eye for this stuff, and we think her energy aligns more with where Talon is heading. Your methods are, well, legacy. Legacy. That word. Like my competence came with cobwebs and a faint smell of mothballs. I kept my voice flat. She even certified for Tier 4 infrastructure? Sierra blinked. Tier 4? That like a reward level. Chase laughed, shrugged. It's not really about certifications anymore, Ratch. It's about vibe, and her vibe is immaculate. For a second, I didn't say anything. The numbness crept in slow and cold, like dry ice under your skin. I'd predicted this, hadn't I? Hell, I'd practically invited it by preparing the fallout. But hearing it, seeing him say it so casually, like I was a broken USB stick he was tossing in the junk drawer, it made my molars grind. He kept going. Anyway, today's your last day, effective immediately. No hard feelings, okay? No hard feelings? I looked at Sierra. She was picking at her cuticles, probably thinking about whether to go with lavender or sage in her next server room Reiki session. I turned my eyes back to Chase. You have no idea what you've just done, I said quietly. He smiled wider, clearly thinking I was bluffing. Come on, Ratch, don't make this weird. I reached into my back pocket, pulled out my badge, laid it down on the desk like it was a sacrificial offering. Gently, no drama, no raised voice. 15 minutes, I said. He frowned. What? You have 15 minutes before everything goes dark. Tell your dad I said good luck. Sierra snorted. Wait, is that like metaphorical? I didn't answer. I just turned and walked out. The office felt different. Not heavier, lighter, like cutting a tumor loose. HR tried to intercept me on the way out. Some poor intern offered me a packet labeled transition support. I took it without breaking stride, tossed it in the trash by the elevator. Back at my desk, I unplugged my personal iPad, slipped it into my bag, deleted nothing, because nothing needed deleting. Every warning I'd given them documented. Every alert ignored. Every fuse lit. By the time I hit the lobby, I was already getting texts. One from Nina in payroll. Did you change permissions? I can't log into anything. One from our European data center rep. Just got vendor ping. Contract flagged as voided. What's happening? And then a Slack message from Chase himself. Hey, there's a weird error on the admin dashboard. You still around? I turned off Slack notifications. In the parking lot, I climbed into my Subaru, exhaled, and finally let my hands shake. Not from fear, from rage, controlled, channeled, ready. They thought they were replacing me with glitter and vibes. They forgot I built the system they were standing on, and I just pulled the manual out from under their feet. The security guy didn't even stand up. His name was Marcus. We'd shared more 2 a.m. vending machine breakdowns and hallway microwave wars than I cared to admit. Guy once offered me half a Slim Jim during a Christmas Eve power outage, like we were survivors in some corporate apocalypse. And now, he just sat there behind the glass, eyes flicking up as I walked by with my tote bag slung over one shoulder and my dignity zipped inside. You good? He asked, like I was leaving early for a dentist appointment. Never better, I said, and we nodded like two war vets passing in a VA hallway. No alarms. No badge tug-of-war. No awkward goodbye potluck with a balloon that says you did your best. From Party City, just me, walking out, silent, calm, like I hadn't just detonated the first domino. I pushed through the front doors into the too bright sunlight. My boots hit pavement like punctuation marks. Behind me, Talon Systems was already shifting, like a house on stilts that didn't realize one of the foundation beams had quietly unscrewed itself and walked away with a smirk. In the corner of my eye, through the tinted glass, I caught a glimpse of Sierra hunched over the admin console. She was dragging UI modules around like they were Pinterest widgets, giggling to herself. Her coffee cup said CEO of Vibes. There was a sticker on her laptop that said Girl Boss Mode, on. She was toggling settings she didn't understand, rewriting terminal permissions like it was a mood board. And somewhere, deep in that tangled web of infrastructure, I knew the system had just logged its first change under her credentials. It had begun. I didn't get in my car right away, just stood there for a moment, breathing. The kind of deep, hollow breath that lives somewhere between relief and recoil. I was out. Technically unemployed, functionally free, but I wasn't done, not by a long shot. My phone buzzed in my back pocket. I slid it out, a text, from Carl, one of our third-party backup vendors out of Austin. I hadn't heard from him in months. Yo, they just revoked the license. That'll hit in 12 hours. You still there? I stared at the message. The license Carl was talking about was a critical fallback key, designed to trigger a permission revalidation across multiple failover points. It was buried inside a framework I wrote myself during a 3-day lockdown when the CEO was overseas and the servers were melting. I'd warned them in January and March and June. Revoke that license without staging a new key and well, you better hope your dashboards are printed out and laminated because the system's about to start eating itself. I replied with one emoji, white heavy check mark, then muted the thread. In the backseat of my car was an old iPad I'd loaded with cached admin logs, offline, disconnected, but still watching. I powered it on, flicked through the most recent pings. 2 minor errors already. One in the Dallas node. One in Newark. Nothing catastrophic yet, just whispers, tremors, but the cascade would come. Chase, meanwhile, was lighting up Slack like a bonfire. Screenshots were already floating around of a message he'd posted to his leadership reform channel, cleaning house. Out with old school tech debt and with the new blood. Let's go. Someone had responded with a laughing emoji, and bro, she was like the system whisperer. He replied, nah, she was just crusty. We've got Sierra now. Streamlined, sexy, scalable. I almost laughed. This man thought throwing jargon at a failing architecture was the same thing as strategy. Thought a girl who edited her TikToks with trap beats and lens flares could manage a tier 4 load balancer. But this wasn't about them anymore. This was about me. My hands, my code, my logic, those were in the bones of Talon. I'd written modules under the fluorescent flicker of failing bulbs. I'd patched security flaws at 3 a.m. while Sierra was probably still deep in an oat milk coma. I didn't just maintain that system, I became it. And when you rip out the heart without checking if there's a backup, you don't get a clean reboot, you get smoke and silence. By the time I got home, another alert had popped on the iPad, something about missing endpoint tokens. Sierra probably nuked them thinking they were clutter. Chase probably told her it was fine, probably high-fived her afterward and ordered kombucha. Let them celebrate, let them think they'd won. I warmed up some leftover chili, poured a glass of cheap Cabernet, and opened a private console. One folder sat there, untouched. Failsafe rblake/init log status, armed. Latency mode, passive. They hadn't disabled it, they didn't even know it existed. The first crack showed up in Portland. 2:17 a.m. their time. Tier 3 redundancy node hiccuped, just long enough to trigger a false positive outage report. Sierra, in her infinite wisdom, had silenced those alerts earlier that day because they were giving her stress dreams. Her exact words, per a screenshot sent anonymously to my Signal inbox, were, "Do we need these red flashing things? They're really harshing my chakra flow." By sunrise, 6 dashboards were showing scrambled data. One ticketing system, used by 4 departments, froze on a request from accounts payable for printer toner. It stayed there, frozen, like a time capsule for every poor soul trying to report an actual problem. Engineers started emailing each other like it was 2003. Slack became a panic channel. Sierra was posting gifs of baby goats. Chase was drafting an email titled, "Transparency and Transition Welcome to the New Era." And I was elbows deep in a plate of diner pancakes. Watching the slow motion collapse on a 5-year-old iPad, I'd jailbroken myself back when Talon refused to issue proper off-site terminals. The waitress poured me more burnt coffee and said, "You look like someone who just won a lawsuit." "Close," I muttered, "I just quit one." The logs ticked on, memory spikes, access errors, terminal timeouts. This wasn't sabotage. That's the part everyone gets wrong. I didn't hack anything, didn't touch a single line of code after I walked out those doors. All I'd done was stop. I revoked my own keys, let the licenses I personally negotiated expire, allowed the protections I'd babysat for years to run their natural course, unchecked, unwatched, like leaving a toddler alone with a paper shredder. And still, part of me hoped they'd catch it, hoped someone in Chase's New Vision squad had the foresight to read even one of the risk memos I'd submitted over the last 6 months. I'd practically drawn them a treasure map in red Sharpie. But I knew better. The moment they let Sierra rename our main monitoring stack to Rainbow Dashboard 2.0, I knew this ship had a hole in the hull and a captain trying to steer with an Instagram filter. At 10:42 a.m., Sierra attempted to log into Terminal V, a central node interface for vendor handoffs and license reauths. The system denied her with a blinking warning. Access restricted. Privileges revoked. Blake Security 0x44F. She took a selfie in front of it. Caption: "Lol, what does this mean? Face #glitch queen #new era Talon." By noon, IT flagged the issue as network latency, which was rich, considering the real problem was more like institutional brain death. Chase ignored the report entirely. He was too busy rehearsing a livestream reveal where he'd showcase the sleek new ops team and introduce Sierra as our synergy guru. He wore a hoodie that said "Disrupt or Die." Honestly, I didn't even have to lift a finger. They were doing it to themselves. But then it happened. The countdown clock appeared. I wasn't expecting that part, not yet. I'd embedded the protocol ages ago as a passive safety measure. A dormant observer, activated only when specific flags stacked in a certain order. Credential mismatch, redundant pathway failure, unauthorized access attempts, expired vendor sync. And there it was. 12:13 p.m. The iPad pinged softly. A new log entry appeared. Failsafe protocol Blake initiated, time remaining 11:57:04. No beeps, no alarms. Just a soft line of red text, blinking like a heartbeat. The countdown had begun. Didn't mean fire and brimstone. It meant full system lockdown. Talon's internal architecture would begin isolating compromised modules, revoking external access points, and most importantly, locking the doors to anyone without my original encryption signature. Talon was about to learn what it meant to be cut off from itself. I sat there, fork frozen mid-bite, syrup dripping back onto my plate. Even I hadn't expected the tripwire to go off this fast. The waitress refilled my cup again. "You okay, Han?" I looked at the screen. At the blinking red numbers. At the logs updating like a heart monitor sliding toward cardiac arrest. "Yeah," I said slowly. just watching a bad decision come home to roost. By 8:47 the next morning, Talon Systems was in full chicken with its head cut off mode, and not the farmyard kind, more like the kind where the chicken's wearing designer sunglasses and demanding a quarterly growth forecast while bleeding all over the boardroom carpet. I had logs open on 3 devices now: the iPad, my laptop, and an old Android burner I used during the 2019 crypto scam phishing scare. Every single terminal was screaming the same thing in different dialects: systems compromised, documentation missing, access denied, failovers failing to fail. In London, a DevOps contractor flagged a critical doc request for one of our European license vendors. His email, riddled with frantic typos, said, "Need urgent credential tree for FR Node 3 handoff. All backup tokens invalid." Chase says look in shared drive, nothing there. Help? There was nothing to help with. I'd removed the last trace of that credential tree 3 days ago, per protocol, after seeing Chase grant Sierra Tier 0 clearance like it was a VIP pass to Coachella. Meanwhile, back at HQ, Chase was standing in the middle of the operations floor like Nero in a Patagonia vest, insisting that a full system refresh would solve everything. Just reset the admin stack, he told someone over Zoom. We'll resync from Sierra's profile. She's got the new workflow vibe. Sierra, bless her caffeinated heart, posted a TikTok mid-crisis, spinning around in the darkened server room while fluorescent lights flickered behind her. The caption: when your data vibes are off but your outfit still slaps fire floppy woman #new era Talon #glitchy but cute within 5 minutes, someone commented, why is your dashboard down though? Face with tears of joy, the post had 18,000 views and climbing. Internally, 12 dashboards were flatlined. Payroll couldn't access their own bank routing numbers. And marketing, God bless M, was still running banner ads for the live stream reveal Chase had planned that afternoon. And that's when my phone buzzed. Blocked number, but I knew who it was. I let it ring, watched it ring, let it die on its own. He tried again, then again. Third time I answered, didn't speak, just breathed. Chase's voice came through, clipped, fake calm. Hey Rachel, hey, just checking in. So, quick thing. We're seeing some weird stuff on the back end and I was thinking, haha, maybe you could pop in real quick, just for clarity, totally chill. I hung up. The truth is I hadn't wanted chaos, I really hadn't. Despite everything, the disrespect, the blindsiding, the way they tossed me out like yesterday's firmware, I never wanted Talon to burn. I built that system, piece by piece. Like a ship I was sailing alone, night after night. But now it was a ghost ship, and they were steering blindfolded. So I did something I hadn't planned to do. I opened a private tab, no cookies, no VPN, no trace, and I sent one anonymous email. Subject: time-sensitive systems access and legal exposure to Talon Systems Board of Directors Internal Listserv Body. Per the 2017 Internal Ops Liability Clause, Appendix B, Section 4, any compromise of infrastructure, access chain, or core systems resulting from personnel changes not reviewed and approved by the founder constitutes a breach of contract and voids all indemnity protections held by Talon Systems against damages incurred. This clause was added following the 2016 DeGraph server outage. All architecture in question was constructed, maintained, and decommissioned solely under my signature. Please refer to Internal Audit Chain, R, Lake #RB09422RED for compliance logs. ETA to critical system failover, less than 4 hours. You may still have time, you may not. I signed it simply. R then closed the browser and deleted the device profile. I sat there for a moment, just breathing, not because I felt triumphant, not even vindicated, but because I'd spent 5 years screaming into a void, filing memos no one read, patching holes no one saw, carrying the weight of systems no one understood. Now the silence was theirs to bear. The first email hit like a slap across the boardroom. It was forwarded to me anonymously at 6:19 p.m. from a doc review at Talon's net address that hadn't been used since the 2020 merger panic. Subject line: urgent, liability review RB clause active. Inside, buried under legalese and full paragraph red text, was the sentence I'd written years ago, back when the CEO was still sane and the company still ran on logic, not influencers and buzzwords. No indemnity shall apply where system failure arises from unapproved personnel changes affecting Tier 0 infrastructure control. Translation: you break it, you bought it. You fire the architect without a contingency plan, you own every failure, every dollar of damage, every lawsuit, every client gone cold, and Chase? He had signed the dismissal order himself. The smiley face next to my name, I didn't have to guess what happened next. The logs painted a perfect timeline. At 6:22, Chase called the general counsel. The call was flagged as escalated within 6 minutes. By 6:30, the GC was emailing the board, citing breach risks, vendor liability exposure, and something called irresponsible executive maneuvering, which I assume is law firm code for this dumbass sank us. At 6:45, Chase tried to spin it. Rachel must have deleted stuff, he reportedly said. She probably wiped the documentation out of spite. Cute theory, except the CTO was on that call too, and under pressure he cracked like a cheap server rack in a Florida data center. She built it all, he admitted. There was no wipe. She didn't sabotage anything. She just stopped. Paused then. No one else ever had full admin clearance. I don't even know where the original keys are. She ran everything manually, every license, every override, every contract. Rachel was the documentation, and Sierra, well, apparently she burst into tears on the spot. It's not my fault, she sobbed. I thought the pink button was for design mode. It looked like Canva, the CTO reportedly whispered that was the system reset button. Silence. By 7 p.m., client services started forwarding angry emails from partners who couldn't access their analytics dashboards. East Coast data centers were pinging errors. Sydney was stuck in a reboot loop. Zurich was locked out entirely. Sierra, in an act of divine idiocy, tried to livestream an apology from the control room. Halfway through, she accidentally bumped the panel and triggered a temporary power drain in server group C. Her phone battery died mid-recording. The video ended with her saying, "Wait, do I smell something burr?" I poured myself a second glass of wine and turned off my Wi-Fi. At 8:12 p.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number, not Chase, not HR, not legal, just a message. He's back tomorrow. This is going to be bad. It was from Paul, the founder's assistant. Loyal, jittery, always in loafers that squeaked. Used to sneak Red Bulls into all-hands meetings and make bets on how long the CEO would ramble about disruptive synergy. Paul didn't write stuff like that unless the sky was cracking open. I stared at the message for a long time. The founder, Walter Fremont, the man who hired me, the man who'd once handed me a busted laptop in a panic and said, "If this doesn't boot by morning, I lose a $12 million contract." I'd fixed it in under 3 hours. He gave me a bonus and a quiet, handwritten thank you note I still kept in my sock drawer. And now, he was walking back into a company with 13 red blinking nodes and no one left at the helm. And somewhere, deep in the smoking wreckage, was a girl in glitter eyeliner still blaming the pink button. They weren't feeling the loss yet, not fully, but they would, soon. The system hadn't crashed yet. It was waiting, because I'd taught it to wait, just long enough for the people who caused the damage to stand center stage and own it. Walter Fremont touched down at JFK just after 4 a.m., dragging 40 hours of jet lag, a briefcase full of foreign NDAs and one espresso shot too many. He skipped the usual security escort, barked at his driver to kill the radio, and grunted his way through the company lobby like a man walking into his own funeral. No hellos, no smiles, just business shoes pounding against tile like a war drum. Upstairs, he bypassed the welcome committee Chase had arranged, some awkward line of middle managers in blazers too tight and smiles too wide, and locked himself in his executive office with his personal laptop. The one no one else dared touch. The one only he used to access the shadow dashboard, the real-time diagnostic view of Talon's entire digital backbone. The laptop word, clicked, connected, and froze. 13 red dots blinked at him from 13 quadrants of the screen. Each one marked a data center: New York, LA, Dallas, Seattle, London, Zurich, Tokyo, you name it. Normally green, they pulsed blood red like distress beacons. He clicked on New York. A warning appeared: failover backup expired. Access rights invalid, clicked Tokyo. Core control system inaccessible. Contact system architect, clicked Zurich. License expired, audit pending. He double-clicked the master node interface, the one meant to override all systems in case of emergency. It opened with a flicker, then filled with a single simple message in pale white text on a black background. Designed by R. Blake, revocable upon misuse. Walter didn't scream. He didn't throw the laptop or call security. He just slammed the lid shut. Hard enough to make the intern down the hall jump. Then came the words that turned the whole floor cold. "Where is she?" Outside his office, Chase had been waiting with a fresh press kit and a half-rehearsed apology for minor system quirks during onboarding. He had no idea the founder was already minutes into realizing his son had taken the structural skeleton of the company and used it as a jungle gym. Walter opened the door, looked at Chase, didn't speak, just stared, something inside him ticking, counting, tallying sins. "Where," he repeated quietly, "is Rachel Blake?" Chase blinked. She doesn't work here anymore." Walter raised an eyebrow. "And who does?" No answer. He walked past him, down the corridor. Past marketing, past HR, past the nervous DevOps contractors whispering about a file called Failsafe Protocol R. Blake/init log they'd stumbled across but were too afraid to touch. Into the boardroom. He summoned the full board. Legal, CTO, CFO. Even Paul, his assistant, looked pale. "Agenda," Walter said, tossing a folder onto the table. One item. He wrote it on the whiteboard in thick, angry strokes: Rachel Blake. Everyone stared. Nobody spoke. Nobody dared. Meanwhile, in a small apartment on the other side of town, I was pouring cereal and watching the city wake up from my window. Phone off. Internet dark. No alerts. No updates. Just the silence of a woman who knew the storm was no longer hers to manage. I didn't need to lift a finger. Didn't need to call anyone or explain myself because the systems were speaking now. And what they were saying loudly, clearly, across every department, every server, every terminal was simple: you shouldn't have fired her. You shouldn't have underestimated her, and now you can't even find her, but that's fine. I was never the type who needed a front row seat to the collapse. I just built the walls and waited for the ceiling to fall. The email came at 3:12 a.m. No subject line, no signature. Just one sentence: you're needed at 9 o'clock. Boardroom. I didn't reply, didn't need to. I knew what the dots said. I knew what the logs were screaming into the void. And I knew the moment the founder saw his own empire flickering red, he'd reach for the only person who understood the wires under the skin. I showed up at 8:58. No blazer, no makeup, no power heels, just boots, jeans, and a thermal hoodie that still had a smudge of chili on the sleeve from 2 nights ago. Hair in a loose bun, face set like granite. I walked past the receptionist, who blinked like she was seeing a ghost, past Marcus at security, who gave me a slow, reverent nod without a word. Elevator up, top floor. Same floor I'd been escorted out of days before, my badge stripped like a criminal. Now, nobody stopped me. The boardroom was full when I entered. Long polished table, nervous eyes, coffee cups clutched like lifelines. The founder stood at the head, arms crossed, jaw clenched. His hands trembled just enough to betray what the stakes were. And there he was, Chase, sitting 3 seats down, pale, jittery, dressed like a man who thought his hoodie and charm could still save him. Sierra wasn't with him. Rumor was she locked herself in the marketing closet after accidentally triggering an HVAC shutdown by trying to reset the office energy grid. Chase opened his mouth. Rachel, look, I think we should. Walter didn't even look at him. Sit down, Chase, he said. Don't speak. The room froze. I stepped to the head of the table opposite the founder. No dramatics, no speeches. I pulled my old iPad from my tote, the same one they'd all dismissed as outdated and non-collaborative. Opened a terminal window. Entered 4 numbers, my original internal access code. On the wall-mounted display behind me, 13 dots blinked once. Then turned green, one by one, like lights in a dark city coming back to life. Silence, except for one soft sound, the founder exhaling. He sank into the nearest chair, his shoulders suddenly decades older. You never sabotaged it, he said, almost to himself. No, I replied. I just removed myself. He nodded. And you waited, I shrugged. Protocols always run their course. The CTO whispered something about cached backup syncing again. Legal leaned over to the GC and muttered that clause. It's neutralized now, right? Paul, the assistant, typed furiously into a tablet, probably updating Walter's calendar from firefighting to begging. Then came the moment. Walter turned his gaze on his son. Not angry, not loud, just, done. You're not VP anymore, he said. But Dad, Chase started. You're done. He said it like he was closing a tab in his browser. Final, click, goodbye. Chase slumped into his chair, looking like someone had just unplugged his ego from the wall. I didn't smile, didn't gloat. I just tapped the iPad once more, then locked the screen. Everything's stable, I said, for now. But I recommend you audit the vendor contracts. Sierra invalidated half of them trying to optimize the UI with a sticker pack. Walter rubbed his temples. Jesus Christ. Someone at the end of the table muttered she thought AWS was a clothing brand. Nobody laughed. Nobody breathed. I stood up. Anything else? I asked. Walter didn't answer right away. Just looked at me like a man watching the last functional piece of his company walk out the door. Finally, he said, stay. We'll fix the structure. Rebuild it around you. Officially, permanently. My eyes flicked to the whiteboard. My name was still on it, but now underlined, circled, bold. I don't need a title, I said, just the access. You'll have both, he replied. The board nodded in unison, but I was already turning away. I didn't need to sit at the head of the table. I was the table. They just finally noticed. The room had settled into a kind of stunned stillness, the kind that only follows a slow-motion collapse that everyone watched happen in real time, but swore wasn't their fault. Chase looked like he was melting into his ergonomic chair, fingers twitching against his phone screen like it might deliver him a lifeline. Walter had gone full statue, rigid spine, hollow stare, the weight of inheritance pressing into his shoulders like gravity had tripled. I stood in that silence and reached into my bag. Not the iPad this time, not a flash drive or folder of patch notes, just a single sheet of paper, crisp, off-white, thick enough to slice egos. I slid it across the table, smooth, deliberate, the kind of gesture you make when you know the room's oxygen levels are about to shift. Walter glanced down at it, squinting at the print, his brow furrowed first, then his jaw, then his hands tightening at the edge of the paper like he might tear it just to release the tension. This is your original contract, he said slowly. Addendum 3, I replied. From the first year, when I pulled you out of that compliance disaster in Toronto. He blinked. I remember the outage. You handed me emergency authorization to restore the system while legal scrambled. Said, and I quote, just get it online and I'll sign whatever you need. His eyes moved back to the clause, the fine print. 6% equity per fully stabilized data center managed over a 12-month uninterrupted cycle. 13 centers, 6% each. 78% transferred quietly, updated through internal legal routing. Ratified by default after no challenge in 90 days. It had all been logged, the signatures, the timestamps, all legally binding. Walter looked up at me like I'd just walked through the wall. You own the company. I tilted my head, not technically. You still have the rest. But if we're talking controlling interest, the room tilted, not physically, but spiritually. Chase made a strangled sound, half laugh, half whimper. This is a joke, right? Some kind of sick legacy prank. I turned to him. No, Chase. This is what happens when you ignore every doc, every warning, every system flag, and every woman who told you no without saying it in a baby voice. Sierra wasn't in the room. Her ghost lingered in the empty chair next to his, probably posting some yoga cry TikTok from the company parking lot while the mainframe coughed up smoke and invoices. I leaned in just slightly so only he could hear me. Your girlfriend's cute, I said. She'd do great at retail. His face went red, then white, then something in between. Walter looked like a man who just realized he'd given the deed to the castle to the chambermaid who actually built the walls. He didn't argue, didn't ask for clarification, didn't threaten lawyers. He just said softly, with a tone of reverence I hadn't heard in 5 years, Miss Blake, welcome to the executive board, and that was it. No applause, no handshake, just acknowledgement. I picked up my iPad, slid it into my bag, reached into my pocket not for badge but for keys. A full-set Office core server, executive suite, all reissued, all mine. I turned, walked out. No security escort. No cardboard box full of sad desk plants. No one dared speak. The elevator doors opened and I stepped in alone. When I reached the ground floor, I paused by the glass wall and looked out. Sierra was standing by her white Tesla, mascara running down both cheeks like a melted Snapchat filter. Her phone dangled from her hand, face down. Next to her, Chase was pacing in slow, impotent circles, shouting into his phone. Just get me someone. I don't care. She can't do that. She can't just own it. But I could, and I did. A black SUV pulled up. The window rolled down. The driver nodded. I pulled out my sunglasses, slid them on, and stepped into the back seat like I hadn't just watched a corporate bloodline eat itself alive. As we pulled away, I didn't look back. All 13 data centers were green again. All lights on, except theirs. Thanks for watching, you cubicle warriors. Hit that subscribe button. Unless you're my old boss, then you're on your own. Revenge of the coffee pot strikes again.